Hey everyone! So I tried to go live earlier today and my internet, because I was driving, just did not work. So I wanted to share, I had heard something recently sorry, I have a kid outside in the sprinkler. It's a nice day, but I'm outside. I heard something recently where someone said, wise people learn from their own mistakes, but even wiser people learn from others' mistakes. So let's use that opportunity here to learn from some of my mistakes. Are you taking him in or are you showing him off? This is Napoleon Dynamite, everybody. He's our new puppy. Okay. My 7-year-old wanted to show him off. Oh, and he's wet.
No, so he's about to go poop, then poop didn't come out.
No, leave him. Leave him outside to do his own business in the grass. Leave him alone.
I'm not putting him on your lap. I'm going to dry him off.
So sorry. So okay. I have been baking my whole life. Let me just get into the story. Learn from my mistakes. So a few years back, I was having a birthday party. And at the time, I was working in a resort. And my mom and I worked together at different departments, but like the same place, I guess. And so there was a wedding there, and this bride had, you've probably seen it or heard of it. It's the red velvet cake and cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory. And so our pastry chefs had made that, and it was so good. And like, when the event was over, there's leftovers. Like, I don't know why they did not give it to the bride and groom or whatever, but we got to eat some. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So I was like, all right, this is the kind of cake I want for my birthday.
Oh,
And
please blow his nose.
okay, shh. And and so I'm okay. I'm making this red velvet cake. It's cake, and then the filling is cheesecake, an actual cheesecake. And so I was like, okay, I'm making this for my birthday, and I believe when I was turning 24. And so we're gonna have this big party with my family and some friends, because my birthday's also up against Halloween. So one of our friends who was a chef was going to come down and cook for the dinner, and it was like a combined kind of Halloween birthday party dinner. So because we both worked and my mom was hosting the party at her house, I was like, all right, I'm going to make this cake, you know, like the day, I think it was like the night before. And I had never made this one before. So while I was at that point still experienced at baking, I'd say I was still pretty intermediate, I guess would be the best way to call it. I was not an advanced baker, especially when it came to decorating. And so I still was, you know, learning things. And I made the red velvet cake, and I made the cheesecake. I made it all the day before the party. And my mom at the time, her house had the most amazing kitchen. I'm talking like top of the line, Martha Stewart quality kitchen. It was gorgeous. So when I had baked the red velvet cakes, they ended up collapsing, and I was so bummed. And I was like, it can't be the ovens, right? They're amazing ovens. There's no way it's these ovens. And I just was like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, we saved them for just in case we needed to level them and use those. But I had lost so much height that it just was this really frustrating mess. And if you've ever had a cake fall on you, you know how frustrating it is. Now, can it be saved? Sure, you can, you know, trim the edges down to where the lowest part is, as long as you fully baked it. And so I just remember, I'm like, I don't have time to redo this darn cake. And my mom, who was an angel, she's like, hey, while you're at work today, I'll bake the cake, because she wasn't working that day. So she rebaked it, and the same thing happened, but it wasn't as bad as the first time. So we're just like, oh. So we used the best of all of the layers and, you know, assembled the cake with the cheesecake, and then I did a cream cheese frosting, and I used the pirouettes. If you've ever seen like those wafer cookies that can go around, they're tall and they have chocolate in the middle, and then I topped it with chocolate covered strawberries. So it was just like beyond. And we just went with it, right? And afterwards, I'd been talking to my friend who was one of the pastry chefs, and at that time I think he was actually head of pastry. And I was telling him what happened, and you know, we were frustrated, and he wasn't at the party. We had some other friends who were chefs there. But he I was like, well, did you account for the high altitude? No. So whatever recipe I had used, and I don't even know what recipe it was now. This was a good 10 plus years ago. I just like, no, I didn't. Our neighbors have geese, isn't that cool? So, I just was like, I can't believe I didn't think about being high altitude and how that can affect my baking. And that is why the cakes collapsed and continue to collapse every time we made them. They rise quicker than they bake, and because they're rising so fast but not baking, they then will collapse. And so that actually had happened to me in college, same state, different location, and they collapsed. So I did not grow up in Utah near Park City, which is where this happened. I grew up in Oregon, which is the West Coast, and you're talking maybe 100 feet above sea level, not very, very far above sea level. Whereas Utah, it's the Rocky Mountains. You're very far above sea level, and you do have to make those adjustments. And if you've ever seen on even like cake mixes, they will show you on like the very bottom. So sometimes you can miss it, but they will show you what to do for that particular recipe to make it foolproof for high altitude. A lot of those baking mixes, I don't use them, but they have so many additives in it that they tend to be pretty safe even if you don't use the high altitude changes. But it's still, you know, hey sweetie, go in and talk to him. It is still a good idea to, you know, test it out and see if there's a difference in your quality when you adjust for the altitude. And he was a metric baker because that's just how the resorts did it. And so he told me some numbers. It wasn't an actual like a volume measurement. It was just something along the lines like if you increase your flour by 10% and decrease your leavener by 5%. It was something weird, and those are not the numbers. I'm making those up, so don't think that they are the numbers. That is how you would want then to convert your recipe to high altitude. But it is a matter of reducing the leavening agents and increasing your flour so that as it's rising, it doesn't rise too quickly and then eventually collapse. This will protect your baked good from collapsing and, keep it structurally sound. So if there's anything out of this, and I feel like high altitude is just one of those things we don't think of as our first thought when a recipe fails. A lot of times something, maybe it caves in and it collapses and we think, oh, I opened the oven too soon, which it could be. Or, oh, maybe my ingredients weren't fresh enough. Also, it could be. But if you're high altitude, you really have to consider, is this recipe meant for this altitude? It makes such a difference. So that is the lesson learned from today and my total failure that was just like back-to-back repeat failures, that if you're in somewhere, and even if you're unsure or you've had a recipe fail, then what you can do is check those altitude adjustments for, my kids are being so loud, I'm so sorry, for your area, because maybe you do need to adjust for high altitude. And it's nice when bloggers or cookbooks or products have that information. I can tell you as someone who reads a fair amount of recipes, and I've tried a lot of different bakers and chefs and things, bloggers don't always add that information. So it's something you have to be aware of, especially if you feel like things are always like, why does this always happen? And it's the same problem. I can never find a good recipe. It may not be the recipe. It may just be that you need to have that technical adjustment so that it is successful. So that is it for me today. That is a lesson learned. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, and maybe it'll apply in your life as to if you've ever had anything fall or collapse, because it is frustrating. It is annoying, especially if it happens a lot. It's just not something super common that a lot of people talk about, or we just don't always see those little asterisk at the bottom of a box recipe saying for a high altitude, da-da-da. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for watching and just tuning into this little story time, or whatever you want to call it. I want to try to do this more. I really like the idea of being a little more present here in the group. And what that may mean is maybe I'm not actually baking today, which I'm not. I'm not doing any baking, decorating. I am working on the backside of like technical stuff for Buttercream Guide and for, you know, I made this announcement. I'm taking apart my course as a whole, which you can still buy the entire course, but I'm offering it in each subject at its own lower price if you only need help in one area. So I'm doing a lot more of like this behind the scenes technical digital work right now and not so much hands-on. So whenever I do hands-on, I try to record it or take pictures or provide something of value from what I've just done. So if you're like, Rachel, what's a story time? It just is a way for me to be here more. And I think it's kind of nice to learn from mistakes of others instead of having to make them yourself. So I hope you have a great day, and I will be seeing you soon.